Good to see y'all. We're just gonna let folks roll in for a few minutes. I've got the PowerPoint ready and we'll get rolling. Okay. I should be able to see if y'all raise your hands. I'm planning on just sort of going through everything and then we'll do questions at the end. So, make note there as needed. If there's anything really pressing, let me know. So today's topic is motivating our children, how it promotes acquisition and on-task behaviors. Our main sort of technical focus today is going to be on preference assessment and its application. It's going to touch on elements of reinforcement as well. Those are sort of fundamentally intertwined. All right. Definition of motivation. It is the general desire or willingness of someone to do something. The reason or reasons one has for acting or behaving in a particular way. The motivation is the why. Something that we try to be aware of fundamentally in applied behavior analysis and something that we try to be ahead of. We want to provide motivation and not just sort of respond and react to it. So, what is a preference assessment? We'll go with the jargony ABA definition first and then the sort of English version after. So a preference assessment is a stimulus preference assessment is a set of procedures used to determine if one or more stimuli may function to increase the rate of specific behavior or behaviors when delivered following the occurrence of that behavior. In practical terms, it is a relatively brief procedure, taking many different forms, in which a clinician or educator quickly identifies stimuli, um, things, objects, really anything someone responds to is a stimulus in a learner's environment, which may serve as possible reinforcers in the acceleration of target behaviors, including academic skills. Put even more simply, a preference assessment is the way we find out what a kid likes and is likely to work for. So the purpose of preference assessments. So many individuals with developmental disabilities are not able to indicate their preferences or dislikes. The simplest form of preference assessment, if you have a fully verbal child, is asking them what they like and what they'd want to work for. That's what a lot of us have had to do in parenting in various forms. Uh, but we work with a ton of kids who don't have that kind of access to language where they can tell us what they want. So we have ways of finding out. Um, we cannot assume that our favorite things and activities may also be preferred by others. That may not be an assumption you were making, but just because one kid likes something doesn't mean everyone does. You don't just say, "Hey, we're gonna come do this," and you get bubbles. Not every kid likes bubbles or Skittles or whatever it is that you might assume is gonna be effective. So you need to, everything's individualized. Um, Things that are reinforcing or rewarding to one individual may be unpleasant for another person. Same idea said another way. Um, and preference assessments aim to identify the individual's favorite things so that they can be used as rewards of appropriate and desired behavior. Again, a reinforcer is anything that makes a particular outcome more likely, right? So if we get a kid to, answer a question or, complete a puzzle or follow a direction, and then we give them a specific thing or a specific response occurs, and that makes it more likely that they're going to follow that direction or do whatever it is we're asking them to do in the future. That is reinforcement. Here are some examples of a preference assessment. This has a little game built into it, so I'm going to be keeping an eye on those raised hands here. As we get to it. So, one sec. Oh, this is all over the place. I think you guys can still hear me. Sorry, this is slightly different than standard Zoom. It's the presentation format, so sometimes I get lost to the button. Anyway, here is an example of a forced choice preference assessment. So we're going to describe it, and then we're going to go back. So the forced choice assessment involves presenting objects and activities systematically to the individual to reveal a hierarchy of ranking or preferences. So you give a kid two things and you have them choose between them. You let them play with it for a little bit, and then you reset, you give them two things, and you take into account what's been chosen over what as you go along. It's deliberate, it requires the most effort, and it is the most accurate. So let's go back, looking at this. If anybody wants to raise their hand and tell me, where's my participants? There we go. There we go. Looking at this, can you tell me what the most motivating, most preferred item is? Any takers? You can raise your hand and then I'll allow you to talk. Uh, Okay, that's fine. I will go through it. So the way it works is this goes chronologically. So you've got this spinner toy going against this push ball toy. The spinner toy is chosen. Then you have this, which again, it's tricky because what do you even call this thing? It's that thing that's like filled with sort of a viscous liquid and a few things that float around and slides through your hand, you know? Um, that is chosen over the push ball toy as well, as is the pretend cell phone. So all three of these things have been chosen over the push ball toy. At this stage, you can basically set the push ball toy aside. You know it's not particularly motivating. Then you take the things that were chosen and set them against one another. So we've got the little slidey squish toy thing against the spinny light toy. The squish thing wins. Spinny light toy is eliminated or is not eliminated at this stage, but you know it's a lower level reinforcer than this one. So you set the spinny light toy against the cell phone. The spinny light toy wins against the cell phone. So you know that is probably up there. And then we have the squishy toy against the cell phone just to make sure. And indeed, this kid is really consistent. The squishy toy is the most preferred, then the spinny light toy, then the cell phone, and then in theory, the push ball toy is fourth of four. That may not be motivating at all, but that's the way it breaks down. So everything is sort of pitted against each other in this sort of round robin way to see what is preferred over what. So yeah, that's forced choice. Okay, preference assessment with parent. Um, I mean, that's just what it looks like. And this is really naturalistic. It's called a single item preference assessment. Quickest, easiest testing method, a lot of fun. Objects and activities are presented one by one. So each item is presented several times in randomized order. You can make note of how long a child plays with each toy or engages with each activity. Um, you keep the items in separate bins for later access, and then you can take pictures of the things, of the different things that are options, particularly the things that the kids seem to be gravitating towards, so that you can, instead of having to access those items, you can present the pictures as something for them to choose, which can tie in really well with our nonverbal learners will often use something called the picture exchange communication system, or PECS, and this is just creating a PEC for we call those, PEC is just short for picture exchange communication, so it's a funny version of the word, but because it sounds pluralized, we'll often use that as a pic, a way to refer to the specific pictures. Okay, preference assessment, direct observation. So this is the most sort of naturalistic thing. You just kind of give the kid an environment and let him go. You stand back and watch to see what toys the child gravitates to. You write down what they went to, what they played with, for how long. You take pictures of the items to use in the future for visual supports. Um, and you can have an activity book or supportive teachers that have centers and use pictures. So yeah, that's you can compile the pictures of things that kids like to make it sort of generalizable across environments and to let folks know what is of interest. This we don't have any follow-up on this, but this slide shows you preference assessment on a Dynavox if you happen to have that app or a device that's specifically built for it. It shows two pictures on the screen and the kid can choose between them in that way. Um, if this is a scenario where you're trying to do a little advanced scouting on something and you have the pictures of what you know is going to be available in an environment, the kid can kind of let you know what they like before they get there. So some specific applications for why you would do it on a screen here. Okay, increasing desired behavior. We talked about this a little bit earlier about the sort of nature of reinforcement. Motivation can be in the form of an object, condition, or event that, when immediately presented following a behavior, increases the frequency of that behavior. And that is an important element, is that there has to be a sort of immediacy to it. We try and when we provide a reinforcer for a behavior, it happens right on the heels of that behavior so that there's an association drawn. I got this because of that, and I will get this more if I do more of that. Um, if you let a little time pass, then that link becomes less clear. So, the kid follows the direction and then you let them come back to the table and then, oh yeah, I'm supposed to get them this. By that time, the kid has sat and twiddled their thumbs and maybe pushed stuff around the desk. And then by the time they get it, that link is not as clear, or maybe not clear at all. So make sure you're ready with the reinforcer whenever you place the demand. The example they give here, during potty training, when the boy uses the toilet, he gets to play with a favorite toy. The toy is the motivating item, and the behavior is using the toilet. Pretty straightforward. When it comes to toileting specifically, I usually advocate for something called a dedicated reinforcer, which is something the kid really, really likes, but that they can't have it under any other circumstances. Toileting is so high priority and so functional and so difficult for a lot of kids that we try and make it towards this one specific thing. Maybe there's a type of cookie that we know they really love and they hardly ever get, or that you're fine putting away and not letting them have any other time. A popsicle, maybe. That kind of thing. A favorite toy, you're probably going to want to let them use that under other circumstances. But it all depends. Sometimes kids aren't food motivated, so you do need to take a toy and set that apart for that reason. So yeah. Okay, now we're going to talk a little more about motivation uh, and delayed motivation. We're going to get into this a little later, but I want to just note since we see it, this is a token chart. This is a thing where you go from giving a reward every single time to letting them pile up their successes to get a later reward, which may be a little more high level. It's maybe something they really like that they get to play with for longer, or, this is a large potty chart here, right? This is a lot of successes. If they completely fill this up, maybe they get something really special like a video game or a toy they have their eye on. Okay, so now that we know what they like, how do we use this information? So we're going to go through 10 ways we're going to use them, and then we'll have following slides to go through them in a little more detail. So I'm just going to give the quick glimpse overview, and then we'll get into it. So at home, we need to think about here, now, today, and in this room. One, we catch them being good and provide behavior-specific praise. That ties in with number three, showing enthusiasm. So it's a little repeaty there. But anyway, two, expect excellence, set high but realistic goals. As I said, three, show your enthusiasm. Four, mix it up, vary those reinforcers. Five, have the child be an active participant. Six, provide choices. Seven, relate into children's lives in functional and appropriate ways. Eight, document improvement. Visuals always help. And nine, reward positive behaviors, which is a through line. Okay, number one, catch them being good. Again, this is one of those things where we have behavior intervention. That's not what we're covering today, but a big part of any behavior intervention plan is going to be something called differential reinforcement, reinforcement of alternative behaviors, differential reinforcement of other behaviors. We're trying to create a clear, unmistakable contrast between engaging in non-preferred behaviors, which in some cases could just be giving an incorrect response or a non-response. In other cases, it might be something more disruptive, like a tantrum or aggression. But those are not going to yield reinforcement. And what is really important is when we see them doing what we want them to do, even if it's like they heard a loud noise and they didn't have a big reaction, or they were told no and they just roll with it, that's one of those things where it's like, okay, that was a circumstance that might have been a disruptive behavior, but it wasn't. They made a good choice, and I'm going to make sure they are rewarded for that. So catching and being good is really important. So behavior specific praise as often as possible. Oh, look, Charlie is walking so quietly. Um, that's different than seeing Charlie walking quietly and going, good job. Because good job doesn't make very clear what it is we like about what Charlie's doing. Decrease the use of negative commenting. We want to use our language to show this is what we want to see more of. And if you know your child's strengths, this is a chance to focus on those strengths, even if it's something that, we already know they can do, that it's not a target necessarily. We want them to know that the stuff they do well is stuff that we appreciate. Two, expect excellence. So we need to have realistic goals. If a child is not speaking yet, we don't want to ask them to recite the Canterbury Tales from memory. But so everything's got to fit with where they are, but we're always pushing, right? We know our child's development, so let's focus on the ones that come first. John will independently follow two-step commands, comes after. John will follow one-step commands without prompts. And with prompts will probably come before that. And then we set them up for success and not failure. So, it's always the what I always say when I talk about programming on my cases is this is what it is at the beginning. It will change. Your kid is going to master things, and having mastered that, we're going to move further and further. We don't get into shaping here, but that's sort of the same idea is that, like, okay, we've established a level of success and we've rewarded that, and now we ask for more. It just has to be gradual and progressive and move as the kid goes. Show your enthusiasm. This one's just a picture of this lady showing her enthusiasm, but that's the thing. We do know that using a higher pitch and using more enthusiasm and having a smile and giving that kind of energy is absolutely more effective than just, oh, good job. Way to go. Hey, great job. You finished that whole puzzle is absolutely more powerful to a kid. So it's not just good practice or being nice. It really works. Okay, mix it up. You have to vary your reinforcers for a few reasons. The first one they show here is just because Peter liked the light up spinning toy today doesn't mean he will like it tomorrow. That's a matter of something called satiation. So if you're leaning too much on one thing, it can lose its motivating power. There's a degree to which novelty carries a lot of the power for these things. Um, there's also over reliance. It's healthy for kids to like a variety of things. So it's like, oh, they like the phone and the phone works. It's like, yeah, but that can become so all-encompassing that it's an obstacle to developing more interests and building out a variety of play skills and that kind of thing. Continuously conduct preference assessments. Just because on that first day where we went through it with someone, they really loved XYZ in this order, that's not always going to be true. Kids are dynamic, interests change, keep it fresh. Um, and the recommendation is you do a preference assessment. And it doesn't have to be complete. It can be one of those more observational forms, but do it about once a week. Or if you see a decrease in motivation using the preferences or the reinforcers that have been previously identified, then go right in and do a reevaluation. We'll often see, let's like, oh, they're just not doing this. And my answer is always like, well, maybe they don't care about what you're offering them. Everything is incentivized. Behavior is lawful. You know, if you've been in the same job for a very long time and the amount of pay you've been getting feels insufficient, then your effort is going to lag. And we're always basically reinforced by pay, and that's something that maybe needs to be changed or altered or and our work needs to be incentivized in other ways. And that's the same thing with our kids. Be an active participant. Um, Having a child participate in their learning keeps them on task. Uh, that's we want buy-in from them. We want them to feel like an equal partner. Um, when you're on task, you naturally decrease the amount of time that you're off task. Well, that's yeah, sort of circular reasoning, but certainly true. An example, Joey likes to move around. He's constantly reprimanded for getting out of his seat. Joey can set snack for siblings. Joey can clean off the table with wipes. Joey can close the door. Joey can get the crafts, turn on off the light, turn on the music, etc. So keep them involved. Don't have them be passive. Give them things to do, and doing those things will result in reinforcement. So it's more opportunities for reinforcement. It's just a matter of having them be full partners in the work that we're doing. Okay. This one's so important. Provide choices. We discussed taking pictures of preferred activities or items. This is a good chance to use them. You offer these things. Which one do you want? With visuals or auditory cues, allow the child to choose their rewards because in choosing, there's something that's extra motivating. That's true. That's true of us in ways we don't notice. And it's definitely true of our kids. If you have said, I want this thing, or I have selected this thing from among my choices, that makes it more exciting, something you're more willing to work for, wait for, whatever the case may be. And then it doesn't just apply to those rewards and reinforcers, it also applies to activities. So um, list out or outline what needs to be done. Once it's complete, it cannot be accessed again. For example, I know that Stephen likes to color, so it's a choice. After coloring, the choice of coloring is no longer available. So it's like a lot of times we'll set a visual schedule for all of session, and it's like, okay, I know we need to work on matching. We need to work on following directions. We need to work on requesting. We need to work on tacting. I know those are the four things. And in between those, there's going to be reinforcement periods. So you have them choose the things that they're working for throughout the day. And you also have them choose, okay, I want to do this first and this second and this third, because you create a level of buy-in by letting them choose what it is they're working on. This is the thing I chose, so it's not so bad. Whatever the case may be. All right, relating to the child. The stuff that we work on should be functional and should be appropriate. So, sometimes when we're working with a kid, we'll work on things like clap or we'll work on things like wave, which are totally isolated, or, clap and wave, stand up and turn around, whatever. Just if following any element of any direction isn't there yet, then we do want that response, and we know that it's a quick and easy response and it can be done at the table and that kind of thing. But more than anything, we want to work on things that are going to be part of their day-to-day lives and that can be, effective and productive and functional. So the examples they give here are sit and listening to a story, cleaning up work area, learning about safety, learning about house rules. Those are things that upon learning them can be immediately applied to contexts outside of session. Um, and relevant to a child's life. I don't know if y'all have seen social stories, but sometimes you're preparing kids for things like having a new baby come live in the house, or getting a new pet, or um, going to a new school. These things are big transitions, they're challenging, and you want to give as much groundwork and as much instruction as possible to prepare kids for them. So, appropriate, relevant, functional. And then document improvement. This is as much for us as it is for them. Uh, you know, it is, I've had cases where parents understandably are like, okay, my kid doesn't feel like they're in a different place from them when we were working before. And I've said, well, when we first started, they said 3 words and now they're saying 50. And, they weren't following directions at all. And now they're following. So it's like, it can be really useful to say like, hey, let's have a look at what we've accomplished, because we want so much for our kids and we're so motivated and concerned about the ultimate outcome that when we have little victories, we can sort of lose sight of their significance, because we're so focused on the end goal. So it is important to keep track of that stuff. Data is really, and data is objective. That's the thing. So, uh, Anthony having 5 toileting accidents this week as opposed to 8, when it was 8 last week and it was 10 the week before. So, you can see the arc of progression, and it's rarely that clean. A lot of charts are up and down, um, which is natural. Things tend not to be as straightforward as all that, but you should see a general progression over time. And same thing. Jack needed to be redirected 10 times this week as opposed to 15 times last week. Tell your BCBA behaviors you would like to have as part of programming. BCBAs know that you see the child at a higher frequency. We trust your observations. I always say you are the world's leading expert on your child. I'll never know as much about them as you do. You're with them every day. You see all these things about them. And so, every intake assessment that BCBA conducts should involve what's important to you, what do you want to work on, stuff like that. And it's always going to be stuff that matters. Maybe you're talking about something that's further down the line, and that thing we were talking about setting challenging but not impossible expectations requires us to take a few steps back. But um, oftentimes what I'll hear is, I want them to use the toilet independently. makes a lot of sense. That's an important skill. We can absolutely work on that. So, yeah, that's a big thing. So, and, maybe you start seeing the behaviors that we're not seeing during session. That's okay. It's something we can help develop an intervention plan for, something we start working towards. So, yeah, communication is really important, and keeping a sort of steady, data-driven monitoring of things is important. Be patient. Can all benefit from that as advice. You learn the history of the behavior. How long has it been going on? What's its frequency? What are its circumstances? Behaviors, habits that have been rewarded for a long time takes time to undo. If a kid has been successfully getting out of doing what they want to do by throwing a tantrum for a good long time, I mean, sometimes years. Sometimes we don't see kids get into ABA until they're 8, 10 years old, and maybe they've developed a history of reinforcement with a particular behavior, whether it's sensory, whether it's escape, whether it's attention, that goes back years. And that can be, it's because, like I say, we create this contrast where you don't get the reinforcement, you don't get the outcome you want from these behaviors that we consider maladaptive or disruptive or a challenge to their development. And we do reinforce these better choices. But if they've gotten a ton of reinforcement for this thing, that contrast can be tough to draw because, again, they're saying, well, it didn't work this time, but it's worked so many times before that, that it can take a while. The examples they give are Joshua eats with his fingers. It takes time to get him to use a spoon for a sustained duration because he's used his fingers for a long time. Nafi hits to get others' attention. It takes time to get him to use his words and to understand that hitting will not get him any attention. It takes a lot of ignoring to counteract all that time that it worked. And yeah, we use data. We're driven by the numbers and by that performance. Okay. We referred to this earlier, but there's examples of individual reinforcer systems. A token economy. Oh, it's weird to say these are seldom done correctly. I feel like a lot of people use this correctly, but um, whenever we start working with a kid, every time they show us the correct response. So initially, we'll probably do something called errorless teaching, where we do a controlling prompt. We say, okay, touch the cat. And I'll take their hat, I'll put it right on the cat, and then I provide a reinforcer, right? Just to say, like, this is what correct looks like, and this is what happens when you are correct. Then I scale back. They need to do it on their own in order to receive that reinforcer. And then once they're able to do that consistently, and every time they do that, they receive reinforcement, you know. So um, after they're able to do that for a while, then it's like, okay, every 3 times feels appropriate. And how do we keep track of that? We use a token economy. Oftentimes it's a sticker. If a kid really likes Thomas the Tank Engine, it can be little pictures of Thomas. So the thing itself is like, yay, I got another Thomas. Or if they like gold stars, we do gold stars, whatever it is that's exciting. And the reason you see these coins and the reason we call it a token economy is it's very comparable to money, right? You are accumulating a thing that in and of itself has no value, right? Like a dollar isn't going to make you happy. What makes you happy about $1 or $20 or whatever amount is what it represents. It can be exchanged for something that you like. And so we're giving them these tokens, which once they reach a certain point, a certain price, can be exchanged for the thing they actually care about. So anyway, and so you move that up gradually. At first, they're working, it takes 3 tokens to be exchanged for whatever it is they want, or 5. And sometimes it can be on like an elaborate sliding scale. Like that, you saw those toys earlier, that little push toy, which wasn't as powerful. Maybe that can be purchased for 1 token, but the spinny toy, which was their second favorite thing, can be purchased for 3. And the squishy toy, which was their absolute favorite, can be purchased for 5. So, there's ways to set it up that are dynamic. But essentially, it's you stop reinforcing every single thing and you start making them accumulate successes. Um, Immediate tangibles on a fixed ratio. That's what I just described in a more jargony way. And then immediate tangibles on an intermittent ratio. So you can also do a thing where if you work for a certain period of time and you're getting consistent work out of them, then it has less to do with the number of successes and more to do with, okay, you sustained that effort. This is usually for something like staying in your seat, where it can be times like, okay, good, you've been in your seat for 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Hitting that success results in the reinforcer. Our role. We need to make learning fun. We need to keep our children on task. And we need to promote acquisition of skills to a functional, applicable, and mastered level. All of this contributes essentially to our being able to accomplish those goals. Additional reading, if you want to take this down, there's a great article called Using Rewards to Teach Students with Disabilities by Bradley Switzel and Cecil D. Mercer. This YouTube link, I clicked on it. It said that it's not active anymore, so disregard, I guess. But there are a ton of YouTube videos and resources out there showing you how to provide effective reinforcement. So I encourage you to look those up. Just make sure they're endorsed by accredited PCBAs. A lot of folks put our work out there. And Google, you can use Class Dojo. Class Dojo is a really fun reinforcement system. My son's school uses it. I see that he gets a point for working hard or for helping others or whatever the case may be. And those points contribute to the possibility for a reward down the line. Okay, that is our presentation. All right, everybody, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. And yeah, hope to see you again soon. All right, I'll wrap it up.